Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into a really significant issue today.
Yeah, it's pretty serious.
We're talking about the recent surge in F1 student visa revocations and SEVIS record terminations that really kicked off in early 2025. It's causing a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty for international students here in the U.S.
Exactly. And, to get a handle on this, we've looked at quite a range of sources.
Right.
Everything from news reports, official university statements, legal analyses, and even, firsthand accounts shared in online communities of international students.
So a real mix.
Yeah, it gives us hopefully a pretty comprehensive picture of what's actually happening and the real-world impact it's having on people.
It can feel, well, overwhelming trying to keep up with all this information flying around.
For sure.
Our aim here is really to cut through some of that complexity, pull out the crucial insights you, the listener, need to know. Okay, so let's unpack this. First up, what's the scale we're talking about? The numbers, and when did things really start to ramp up?
Well, okay, so Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he reported over 300 student visa revocations by late March 2025.
Okay, 300.
But then, just a couple of weeks later, by April 11th, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, that's AALA, they reported a much, much larger figure.
How much larger?
Over 4,700 SEVIS record terminations.
Wow. 4,700.
Yeah. And the vast majority, 4,713 to be exact, were F1 students. There were about 23 M1 students, too.
And how's this being described? I mean, is this normal?
Oh, absolutely not. It's being widely described as unprecedented. And it's definitely ignited significant due process concerns, which is a major theme here.
And is it still escalating at that pace, or has there been any change recently?
Actually, it does seem like the initial wave might be slowing down a bit, according to more recent reports.
Okay.
As of, say, April 22nd, the number of new termination reports had dropped off quite a bit. There were apparently no new reports in the couple of days leading up to that.
And Eddie, why?
Well, it's possible, maybe even likely, this slowdown is connected to the growing number of legal challenges that have been filed.
Right, the pushback. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's get to the core of it. What reasons are actually being given for these revocations and terminations? What's the official line?
Well, initially, Secretary Rubio mentioned criminal activity as the reason for the visa revocations.
Okay, straightforward enough, maybe.
But then it seems the criteria broadened out. There was a DHS announcement, Department of Homeland Security, on April 9th.
And what did that say?
It indicated that politically sensitive activity, which could include social media content, even allegations of harassment, would now be grounds for denying immigration benefits.
Politically sensitive activity. That sounds, well, incredibly broad, doesn't it? And kind of subjective.
It absolutely does. Very open to interpretation. And when you look specifically at the SEVIS terminations, some of the reasons cited fall under this category of otherwise failing to maintain status.
Which can mean a lot of things,
Yeah.
historically.
Right, but now it includes things like identity match in criminal records and student identified in criminal records check. Interestingly, there also seems to be a pretty strong correlation between students who've been fingerprinted for some reason and these terminations.
Correlation, but not necessarily causation.
Exactly. It's strongly correlated, but it's not like everyone fingerprinted got terminated.
And I think I read this. There have been some pretty alarming errors in this process, mistakes being made.
That's absolutely right. We're hearing reports of clear cases of mistaken identity,
Well,
individuals who were actually victims being incorrectly flagged as perpetrators.
oh, it's awful.
Yeah, and in one really concerning instance, even U.S. citizen attorneys who were representing affected students apparently received termination notices themselves.
Attorneys.
Yep. And we've also seen specific examples hitting the news or mentioned in legal filings. For example, Mahmoud Khalil's participation in pro-Palestine protests was reportedly a factor. Rumeysa Ozturk faced issues after she co-wrote an opinion piece critical of her university president. Khalid Suri, there were alleged connections to a Hamas advisor mentioned. Yoon Seo Chung, also involvement in a pro-Palestine protest.
So, a connection to activism or criticism seems to be a thread in some cases.
It appears so in some reported instances. And then there's also this very vague reason that's popped up: serious adverse foreign policy consequences.
Wow, what does that even mean in practice?
Exactly. It's incredibly unclear. And this is all quite a shift from the, let's say, more typical reasons for SEVIS termination we used to see, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Remind us, what were those more standard reasons?
Well, historically, SEVIS could be terminated for pretty clear-cut academic or immigration rule violations, like failing to maintain full-time enrollment or working without authorization.
Right, the basics.
Exactly. Less severe, but still serious. Violations included things like dropping all your courses without permission, not reporting your address change within 10 days. That's a big one people forget.
10 days, yeah.
Or getting expelled or suspended and not leaving or transferring properly. Or even just letting your I-20 expire before your program ends.
Okay.
And of course, the really serious stuff like using fake financial documents or, marriage fraud, those have always carried heavy consequences, potential deportation, even a lifetime ban from coming back.
Okay, this brings up a really crucial point for students trying to understand what's happening to them. What's the actual difference, legally speaking, between having your visa revoked and having your SEVIS record terminated? They sound similar, but they're not the same, right?
That's a super important distinction, yeah. Think of your visa stamp, the sticker in your passport. That's basically your ticket to travel to the U.S. and ask for entry at the border.
Okay, permission to knock on the door.
Kind of. But your actual legal status as an F1 student, that's granted by DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, after you're immigrated into the country.
Ah, okay.
So getting your visa revoked doesn't automatically kick you out if you're already inside the U.S. It mainly means you can't leave and get back in easily, maybe not at all.
All right, makes travel impossible.
Pretty much. But a SEVIS termination, that's different. That means DHS has actively ended your legal permission to be here as an F1 student. That's what carries the much more immediate risk of being detained and deported.
Got it. So SEVIS termination is the thing that puts you immediately out of status while you're here.
Precisely. And it seems like a huge part of the problem, the anxiety, is this lack of clear information and what people are calling a lack of due process.
Absolutely. That seems central.
Yeah, a really consistent theme in all the reports, the anecdotes, is that students often get zero advance warning. No explanation before their visa is pulled or their SEVIS record is just terminated. Yeah, and that lack of transparency, it makes it incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, for them to figure out why it's happening, let alone try to defend themselves or fix whatever the supposed issue is.
Which feels fundamentally unfair.
Well, the legal challenges are arguing exactly that. They're strongly arguing this violates their Fifth Amendment rights, the right to due process, which includes notice and a chance to be heard before the government takes such a major action against you.
And are the courts listening to these arguments? Are they taking this seriously?
Increasingly, it seems they are, yes. We're seeing courts acknowledging what they're actually calling severe due process violations. They're pointing to the lack of transparency in these procedures.
That's significant.
Yeah, some judges have even used the term Kafkaesque to describe the whole situation, this bureaucratic nightmare students are facing where things seem arbitrary and impossible to navigate.
Kafkaesque. Wow.
Yeah.
So given this mess, what are students actually doing? What legal steps are being taken? What actions are we seeing?
Well, there's been a significant response. A lot of lawsuits are being filed across the country, directly challenging whether these revocations and terminations are even legal.
Okay, lawsuits. Are they getting anywhere?
There have been some notable successes, particularly with something called temporary restraining orders, or TROs.
TROs, right.
Several courts have granted these, and what a TRO does, effectively, is it orders the government to reinstate the student's F1 status, at least for now, while the case proceeds.
So it pauses the negative consequences.
Exactly. We've seen examples reported involving a Dartmouth student, cases brought by the law firm Abanias Law, and a big lawsuit filed by Cuck Baxter representing a group of 133 students.
133 students in one go.
Yeah. And these TROs, they can do a couple of key things. They can order the government to restore the student's SEVIS record, which is huge.
Crucial. And
they can prevent ICE immigration and customs enforcement from deterring or removing the student while their main legal case is being considered by the court.
Buys them time and safety.
Right. And in one really significant case that Cuck Baxter won with 133 students, the judge, Judge Calvert, actually ordered retroactive reinstatement of their SEVIS records and even their OPT or CPT.
OPT and CPT too, that's work authorization, right?
Exactly. Optional practical training and curricular practical training, super important for getting work experience related to their studies. So that was a big win.
So it really seems like the legal route, going to court, is having more success than just trying to fix it through the usual channels.
It definitely appears that way right now, yes. Pursuing legal action, whether it's seeking a TRO or joining a lawsuit, seems to be proving more effective than, say, just applying for reinstatement administratively.
What about those administrative options, like applying to get your status back if it's terminated? Is that still possible?
It is, technically. There's reinstatement through USCIS, that's Citizenship and Immigration Services, by filing a Form I-539, but reports suggest it's a very slow process.
So uncertain.
Exactly. Uncertain outcome. To even be eligible, you generally have to prove that the violation of your status was somehow beyond your control and that you plan to go back to being a full-time student.
Sounds like a high bar.
It can be, and it's strongly, strongly recommended that students get help from an experienced immigration attorney if they go down that path.
And appealing the SEVIS termination itself.
That involves filing motions directly with SEVIS, the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, using a Form I-290B. But again, given how complex this all is, especially now, legal help is really advisable there too.
Man, this must just be causing immense stress and, well, chaos for the students caught in the middle of all this. What are the potential impacts on them?
Oh, the impacts are huge, substantial, far-reaching. You've got the immediate threat of losing legal status, which could lead to deportation, obviously disrupting their education, their whole lives here.
Yeah.
They also risk missing out on job opportunities, maybe internships they had lined up, losing scholarships or financial aid they depend on. And then there's the emotional toll, the significant distress, anxiety, maybe even depression. It's a lot.
Absolutely. So what's the advice then? What are immigration lawyers, universities telling international students right now? How should they navigate this?
Well, for students who are maybe outside the U.S. and applying for an F-1 visa now, the advice is basically be meticulous. Have a rock-solid application.
Every no dotted, tune crossed.
Pretty much. Practice thoroughly for the visa interview, because consular officers are likely doing much stricter screening. And apply early. Expect delays, maybe even denials.
And for students already here in the U.S.?
For them, the absolute top priority is maintaining their legal status, dotting those I's and crossing those T's constantly.
Meaning?
Strictly following all the immigration rules and university policies, keeping up full-time enrollment, reporting any address change to their DSO, the designated school official, within that 10-day window.
Don't forget the 10 days.
Never forget the 10 days. Keep a close eye on passport, visa, I-20 expiration dates. Talk regularly with your DSO. Just stay on top of everything. And it's also really important to understand there's no automatic grace period if your SEVIS gets terminated because you violated your status.
No 60-day cushion or anything like that?
Not for a status violation termination, no.
Okay. We've also heard some concerning things about students maybe feeling pressure to just leave the country quickly after their SEVIS is terminated. What should they know about that?
That's a really important point. Yes, some students have apparently received emails or communications that sound pretty intimidating, maybe implying they need to depart immediately.
Right.
But here's the crucial thing. Unless a student has been formally served with a notice to appear an NTA, which is the document that officially starts removal proceedings in immigration court, or unless they've actually been ordered removed by an immigration judge, they aren't necessarily required to just self-deport based only on some scary emails. There might be legal options to fight the termination, to stay and figure things out.
So don't just panic and leave.
Definitely don't panic. Absolutely seek advice from an experienced immigration attorney before making any huge, irreversible decisions like leaving the country if you don't have to yet.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
It is reassuring, though, to hear that many universities seem to be stepping up to support their international students through this. What kind of help are they offering?
Yeah, many universities are actively trying to increase support. We're seeing some institutions declare themselves sanctuary campuses, though the legal meaning of that can vary.
But the sentiment is supportive.
Right, and practically, they're increasing resources. Things like providing access to pro bono free or low-cost legal aid services, offering mental health counseling, which is hugely needed right now,
I can imagine.
providing extra academic advising to help students navigate study disruptions. Many are also setting up referral networks to connect students with good, experienced immigration lawyers in the local area.
So connecting them to outside help, too.
Exactly. Plus, issuing campus-wide emails, public statements of support from university leaders, and distributing Know Your Rights material so students are better informed.
That's good to see. Now, thinking longer term, This situation must also have big implications for students hoping to work in the U.S. after graduation, right? Like through OPT, CPT, and maybe getting an H-1B visa eventually?
Absolutely. Those practical training programs, OPT and CPT, are so vital. They're the main way international students get that practical work experience in their field of study. And these programs, they've faced threats before, calls to limit or end them.
Right, during the Trump administration particularly.
Exactly. So if we see a shift back towards stricter immigration policies overall, making that jump from an F1 student visa to an H-1B work visa could become much harder again.
How so?
Potentially higher denial rates for H-1Bs, more scrutiny, making it tougher for U.S. companies to sponsor international graduates. It just creates a lot of uncertainty.
Uncertainty for the students and for employers too, right?
Definitely. For employers who rely on hiring talented international students through OPP and the STEM OPT extension, this adds a layer of risk and unpredictability.
We touched on social media earlier. Can we circle back to that? What's the latest understanding of how online activity might be playing a role here?
Yeah, it's becoming increasingly clear that social media posts, or really any online activity that immigration authorities perceive as politically sensitive or maybe critical of U.S. foreign policy, can lead to more scrutiny.
Even if it wasn't intended that way.
Potentially, yes. Even posts that might seem harmless or unintentionally controversial could cause problems. And simply deleting posts might not be a solution.
Why not?
Because authorities might still be able to access archived content. And similarly, just deactivating your social media accounts altogether, that could actually be viewed suspiciously, like you're trying to hide something.
So damned if you do, damned if you don't almost.
It's tricky. The best advice really is to consult with an immigration attorney before making any sudden moves with your online presence if you're concerned. And the fact that USCIS is now explicitly saying that politically sensitive online activity can be grounds for denying immigration benefits, well, it just highlights how careful students need to be online.
Extreme caution needed. Sadly, whenever there's this kind of uncertainty and vulnerability, scams tend to pop up. Are international students being targeted by scammers now?
Yes, unfortunately that's happening too. There are concerning reports of really sophisticated scam phone calls.
What kind of scams?
People calling, pretending to be immigration officials, maybe ICE officers, even local police. And they use threats, often threats of immediate deportation, to try and scare students into giving up personal information or worse, sending money.
Awful. Exploiting their fear.
Exactly. So it's really crucial for universities, for DSOs to proactively educate their international students about these scams, how to recognize the red flags, how to report them, and to know that legitimate government agencies typically don't operate that way, as demanding money or sensitive info over the phone with threats.
Good point. Okay, finally, looking at all these cases, is there any clear pattern emerging? Are students from certain countries being targeted more than others? Or is it random?
You know, interestingly, so far, no obvious pattern based on nationality seems to have emerged. Students from a really diverse range of countries have been affected.
So it's not focused on one region or country?
It doesn't appear to be, based on current reports. And another key point. There are documented cases where the students terminated had absolutely no criminal history, no known prior immigration problems. It's not just hitting people with obvious red flags.
Which adds to the feeling of unpredictability, I guess.
It does. And while the total number of revocations and terminations is significant and devastating for those involved, it is worth putting it in perspective just slightly. Overall, it still represents a relatively small percentage of the total international student population in the U.S.
What kind of percentage?
Less than 1%. So while the impact is huge for individuals, it hasn't affected the vast majority of international students yet.
Right. Okay. This has been incredibly thorough, really insightful, digging into what's clearly a very complex and, frankly, concerning situation. To sort of bring our discussion to a close, what are the absolute key takeaways you think our listeners should remember from all this?
I think the most critical points are, first, the unprecedented scale of these recent F1 visa revocations and SEVIS terminations. Second, the really serious due process concerns that lawyers, advocates, and even courts are raising. And third, the fact that legal challenges are happening and seeing some success.
Okay.
And for any international students listening, the message has to be, know your rights, understand your status, and please, seek legal counsel from a qualified, experienced immigration attorney if you're affected in any way, or even if you just have concerns about your situation, don't try to navigate this alone.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting looking forward. This whole situation, it's not static, is it? It's changing fast.
Very.
So we really have to encourage you, our listener, to stay vigilant, stay informed. Keep checking reliable sources. Your university's International Student Office is key. Reputable immigration news sources, legal service providers. The legal landscape is shifting day by day, it feels like.
It really does.
And getting expert advice that's specific to your situation is truly the only way to navigate these choppy waters. And maybe take a step back and consider the bigger picture too, right? What does this all mean for the future of international education here in the U.S., for that global exchange of talent and ideas?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? What will the long-term impact be on the U.S.'s reputation as a welcoming place for students and scholars from around the world? What does it mean for our universities, our research, our economy? Big questions.
Yeah, huge questions to ponder. And on that note, if you, the listener, have been directly affected, or if you have general questions or experiences you feel comfortable sharing again, please don't share any personally identifying information in any public comment section or a forum. But if you want to share general thoughts, we'd be interested to hear them. It could help shape a future discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks.